this. Well, David Benavidez had this to say. He says, Charlo is a more exciting fight than Plant. Quoted as saying, at the end of the day, if I want to retire and I want to be one of the greatest in my era, I have to fight all these guys. So whoever it is, I don't care who it is. I'll fight anybody. I think that Charlo might be a little bit more dangerous fight than Plant.
What?
He has a lot of experience. I feel like he has more power, honestly. I feel like Caleb Plant belongs at 160. He don't belong at 168. I feel like it would be a way more exciting fight with me and Charlo because we'll both be there looking for a knockout. It'll be an extremely fan-friendly fight. It doesn't matter, man. Everybody wants to fight with me. I'll take the fight. I'm gonna tell you something. I don't think that David is completely wrong here in his assessment as far as what fight makes for a more exciting fight. Maybe a Jermall Charlo makes for a more exciting fight than a Plant fight because Charlo is not as cerebral a fighter as Caleb Plant. You know, Caleb Plant, he's a finesse fighting kind of guy, whereas Jermall, he's more of an artillery guy. So as far as the styles go, yeah, maybe Jermall makes for a more exciting fight.
Maybe.
But I'll tell you that it's not as a high caliber fight, high quality fight between super middleweights. And this idea that somehow Jermall's got more power than Caleb?
What?
Wildly anecdotal and completely baseless. Remember, we're talking about a fight that would be taking place at 168 pounds.
Well, Jamal ain't proved shit.
168, as opposed to where he is right now, 160. And at 160, his last fight, they had to bring up a guy from 154. Dennis Hogan.
Remember that guy?
A junior middleweight that they brought up the middleweight to decorate Jermall's highlight reel. Because as of late, he really hasn't been looking his best. He didn't look good against Matt Korobov. He didn't look good against Brandon Adams.
Another junior middleweight.
And a rather unheralded one as well.
Who's that guy?
Brandon Adams, this is a guy who hasn't scratched the surface at 154, much less 160, and this is a guy who actually went the distance with Jermall Charlo.
At 160.
But you're telling me that Jermall Charlo has more power than Caleb Plant does at 168. This same Jermall Charlo who couldn't take out a 154-pounder at 160. All right, David. I see what you're doing here. You're talking this guy up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're doing. You're talking him up, and the question is, why?
Why are you trying to sell me this guy?
This guy who they had to bring up a junior middleweight up there to middleweight so that he could go back to being a knockout artist of some kind.
Hogan.
A very moderately sized junior middleweight, I might add. I mean, Dennis Hogan, he's not a big guy as far as junior middleweights go, let alone middleweights. He's quite shrimpy for that weight class. They had to bring up this little guy for Jermall Charlo to get himself a knockout because in his last two fights, he really didn't look his best.
And David fucking knows that.
I'll tell you what I think. I think David's playing dumb. I think he's talking up Jermall Charlo because he feels Jermall Charlo is a more beatable opponent. And perhaps that is a fight that his team would be more receptive to because they also view him as a more beatable opponent. Jermall Charlo's done abso-fucking-lutely nothing in the super middleweight division, and what he's done in the middleweight division is nothing to write home about. So maybe a fight between David and Jermall is more exciting because of the styles, yes, and because there's a chance that David knocks Jermall's fucking block off.
Yeah, that's kind of exciting.
As opposed to a Caleb Plant fight. Caleb Plant, who is a more cerebral fighter, a fight that has a higher probability than a Charlo fight of going the distance because Caleb might choose to box from the outside, slow the fight down, and use that defensive prowess of his, use those legs, to keep this a boxing match, keep this a chess match, as opposed to a firefight. I'm not telling you that Plant versus Benavidez can't end in a knockout. I'm saying it has a higher probability than a Charlo fight of going to the cards. Because in a Charlo fight, essentially what you got is two guys that are looking for the knockout. Both guys are looking to take the other guy out.
And one might.
In that situation, it's highly probable that one of them will succeed. As opposed to a Plant fight.
Finesse fight.
Two super middleweight champions, two undefeated guys, everything's on the line. That kind of situation has a higher probability of going to the cards.
Yeah,
At least more so than a Charlo fight. So don't sit here telling me that you think Jermall packs a bigger punch than Caleb Plant does when Jermall Charlo's struggling to put away junior middleweights at middleweight, whereas Caleb Plant, for what it's worth, he has been looking the part. He thoroughly outboxed Jose Uzcategui, made short work of Mike Lee, and gave a one-sided beating to Vincent Fagenboots. And I know what you're thinking. Those aren't big names. Those aren't high-profile guys. Okay, they aren't. It's true. What fucking high-profile guys has Jermall Charlo for?
Huh?
Should I call my mother and tell her that Jermall Charlo won a 12-round decision over Brandon Adams?
Should I?
Is this the kind of victory that I should be shouting from the rooftops about?
Oh, don't forget Matvey Korobov.
The same Matvey Korobov whose straight left hand kept finding your face? I mean, he couldn't miss with the goddamn thing. Every time he threw it, you were there to catch it. I mean, look, like I said, if David Benavidez is talking down Caleb Plant and talking up Jermall Charlo, it strikes me as David trying to hoodwink the boxing fans, trying to convince them that somehow the scalp of Jermall Charlo is a bigger and better scalp than the scalp of Caleb Plant.
And that's just a lot of bullshit.
Okay, well, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now
What?
that the Jose Pedraza-Lespierre fight,
What about it?
that's off. And that's as a result of Lapierre's manager, Josie Tavares, testing positive for COVID-19. These are the protocols. These are the provisions that ensure all the affected parties' safety.
They're doing what they gotta do.
And the silver lining here is that it's not a complete wash. They're looking to reschedule Pedraza versus Lapierre and Maya versus Joseph for July 14th. We all know we talked about Michaela's situation, that false positive, that entire fiasco.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, it caught Nicole Moretti on June 14th. The fight is still on, so it's not a wash.
Fight's still on.
They haven't scrubbed it. It's simply postponed. And you didn't need me to tell you any of this, You could have came across this same information yourself. Really caught my attention about all of this is how Top Rank essentially beat Matchroom to the punch as far as getting out there.
Back out there.
Bringing boxing back to the boxing fans and have effectively beat Matchroom to the punch, because Matchroom has yet to stage a card as we transition out of this global pandemic. And that's not all, folks. The people over there at Queensbury, Frank Warren, a guy who'd love to one-up Eddie Hearn any old day of the fucking week,
We know.
they announced that they're going to be staging a couple of cards in the very near future. Seems that Eddie Hearn and the people over there at Matchroom,
They're falling behind.
I mean, right now, the only guys with less news coming out about the near future than Matchroom are the people over there at the PBC.
Yeah, what do they got going on?
Not a whole fucking lot from the look of things. Who knows when they're gonna start staging cards again. I just found it quite admirable on Top Rank's part that as soon as the news broke that Pedraza versus Lapierre was off, just about as fast as it took for that news to break, it took just as fast for news to break that it's not completely over. It's just postponed, and they're rescheduling it for July 14th. And this is at a time when Matchroom doesn't necessarily have a lot of news themselves coming out as far as what are they planning to do as we transition out of this thing. We've been hearing a lot of preliminary rumblings, but nothing tangible, nothing finite, nothing concrete.
Nothing you can really count on.
Whereas with Top Rank, that initial card with Shakur Stevenson on June 9th, that entire card, it was a lot of fun. Top Rank, it really came back with a bang. And the June 16th card with Mike Plania upsetting Joshua Greer. Fun card as well.
I mean, they're definitely getting out there.
The only silver lining here for Matchroom is that, in spite of Top Rank beating them to the punch, being the first outfit to get out there as we transition out of this global pandemic, the numbers they've been bringing back aren't that great. It's nothing to write home about. So in order for Matchroom to get back in the lead and get ahead of this thing, they've got to put on the kind of fights with the kind of intrigue that'll get everybody watching. Because that's really what's been missing. The kind of intriguing fights to where two fighters enter the squared circle and you're just not quite sure what's going to happen. Granted, the Top Rank is working very hard to put something out there for the boxing fans. Working quite diligently, I might add. But if the people over there at Matchroom are going to make up for lost time, well, they're going to have to put on some titillating fights. The kind of fights that they perhaps wanted to wait to put on until it's safe to stage those fights in front of a crowd, but the kind of fights that it's going to take to really grab people's attention and make them sit down, tune in, and watch. We'll see what happens. And finally, in heavyweight news, Murat Gassiev could potentially make his heavyweight debut in Sochi.
Where's that?
In Russia.
The Secretary General of the Russian Boxing Federation, Umar Kremlev, is helping put together the event details.
Yes, the fight of Murat Gassiev is being planned for one of the casinos in Sochi. However, in the summer it will definitely not take place.
Gassiev was supposed to make his heavyweight debut in 2019, but it was prevented by injuries. Later, he could not hold the planned match due to an unsuccessful training camp. His first fight of 2020 was delayed when the entire sport was put on hold due to the coronavirus pandemic. In total, the 26-year-old athlete has 26 wins, 19 by KO, and 1 defeat. And 1 fight was declared a no contest. The hard puncher trained by veteran coach Abel Sanchez has been out of the ring for nearly 2 years, since July of 2018.
The Usyk fight.
You know, I'm probably one of the only guys on this side of the world, this side of the planet, that still remembers who Murat Gassiev is and how he's a very entertaining fighter. I'm a guy who's been waiting quite patiently for his heavyweight debut to no avail, because as the article states, it's been almost 2 years since this guy had a fight.
He got injured.
Then he had a bad training camp.
A bad training camp.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means.
We all know COVID-19 hit.
And that fucking shit reared its ugly head. That came around, shut everything down. I mean, you talk about losing time and losing some of your best years, a portion of them. Boxing being a young man's sport, Murat Gassiev still being a young man of sorts.
He still is.
He's lost quite a bit of time. Approximately 2 years. In spite of all of this, there still is genuine intrigue as far as what's he going to look like when he comes back, how's his career going to go, what's left of it, in the heavyweight division, where he means to campaign from here on out. There are those questions that still need answers. But there are other questions. You know, in April of last year, 2019, over a year ago,
Did you forget?
this guy signed a deal with Matchroom. I don't know if you guys remember. They picked this guy up. And I said it then. It's a good signing. Murat Gassiev might not be known amongst the American casuals, but as soon as you feast your eyes on this guy, he's a fucking animal. He's a fan-friendly fighter that's good for a knockout. Granted that Usyk made him look quite the fool, there's no shame in that, because, well, that's Usyk, Olympic gold medalist and undisputed cruiserweight champion. So you lose in one-sided fashion to Alexander Usyk. It's not the end of the world. You're a young guy. There's plenty of time to pick up the pieces. Start over. He gets signed to Matchroom in April of last year, in 2019, and everything's looking promising. You know, that you have a major outfit with a major platform, major platforms around the world.
Sky Sports.
They pick you up,
DAZN.
and it results in a whole lot of fucking nothing. So here today, we're hearing that he's going to be making his heavyweight debut, not here in America, but over there in Sochi.
Что ты делаешь там?
Sochi in Russia, as opposed to fighting on a card somewhere here in America.
Okay.
You know, because Murat Gassiev, he's still over there at Big Bear Lake with Abel Sanchez. He's still based out of the United States, but his heavyweight debut won't be in the United States. It's going to be in Sochi, Russia. So what's the status of this guy's relationship with Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, all those guys? Is he still on that side of the street?
Was he ever?
Because he signed that deal. He obviously didn't debut under that banner. Not yet.
Never got the chance.
For some reason, one reason or another, he just never got around to having a fight the last 2 years.
Well, that sucks.
And if his heavyweight debut is going to take place at a venue over there in Sochi, Russia, doesn't really look like that's going to be a Matchroom card, a Matchroom event.
Это не.
Is it going to be picked up by DAZN? Think about it this way. If anybody ever needed a tune-up fight, you know, a little keep busy gimme fight against some no-hoper, it would be Murat Gassiev. And it just so happens that those are the kind of fights we're seeing here and now as we transition out of this global pandemic, as it's not safe to stage big fights for big crowds.
It's all keep busy fights.
In that situation, in that scenario, Murat Gassiev would be one of the ideal candidates for Matchroom and DAZN to put on some little card, you know, let that guy have a little keep busy fight. He needs one after damn near 2 years out of the ring. So if he still were on that side of the street, that's what we would be seeing. But that's not what we're seeing. We're not hearing that Murat Gassiev's next fight is going to come by way of Matchroom. Oh, he's going to have a fight. Won't be this summer.
According to Kremlev.
There's no mention on the status of his relationship with Matchroom. So I guess there is no relationship? Did they cut this guy loose?
Looks like it.
Tell you what, it'd be a great pity if they did, because, yeah, he's got promise. He's an entertaining fighter, but more importantly, relative to this situation, the current situation around the world, the only kind of cards you can stage are tune-up fight, keep busy kind of fights for your fighters. And this is the ideal guy to use in that situation. But it doesn't look like he's at your disposal. And if he's not, that opens up a new set of questions. If Murat Gassiev and his relationship with Matchroom ended before it started, is it possible he ends up on the top-ranked side of things? Is it possible that he ends up on the PBC side of things? Because the market is still very competitive, even here today, even in the midst of this global pandemic.
They're competing.
Any talent out there floating in the boxing cosmos is up for grabs. And if Matchroom doesn't have this guy anymore, what might happen is he might end up being somebody else's fighter on some other side of the street. We'll see what develops once it develops.